Hello everyone and welcome to a new video of Mr. Mark Explains History. In this video we will keep talking about time periods like I've done in the previous videos, but now we're going to focus on other perspectives and time periods in other places. So in those previous videos I've covered the five big time periods in Western history. So prehistory, ancient history, Middle Ages, early modern age and the modern age. But they only really apply to Western history. They make sense for Western history. So they make sense for people from Western Europe or people who live in the US. But if you come from another background and if you look at the history of other places, they don't really make sense anymore. So that's what I want to talk about today. So first, we're going to focus on time periods in other places. So they do not apply really well to other places, and I'll explain why that is. And also in other places that might have another perspective on history and on time in general. So they will make different choices when historians make time periods. Let me explain that a bit better. So what do I mean with time periods in other places? So why is it important to realize that in one place they might have one time period, but another name or another time period would work better in another place? So, for example, around 500 AD in Western Europe, we talked about this, ancient history ends and the Middle Ages start. And that's because of the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the start of, let's say, the Dark Ages. I've talked in other videos why it's called Dark Ages and why historians make that choice. But if you look, let's say, in other places, that does not really make sense anymore. So why is that? Because in the early Middle Ages, in those Dark Ages in Western Europe, there's a decline in knowledge. The level of development, science, literacy, it's all way less than it used to be when the Romans were there, when the Romans were in charge. Also, in the Roman Empire in the West, there were major cities. There was a lot of trade. People in England had jewels from, for example, Egypt or the Middle East. All of that was there. It's gone. It's becoming less. And that's why in the West, we make a new time period. We say, okay, now the Middle Ages started. But if we would look already at the Eastern Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire does not collapse. It actually stays strong, and they keep this same level of development, and they have a massive city with Constantinople, and they still have the bathhouses and the big libraries and a lot of science. So there is not a dark age at all. So calling that Middle Ages or Dark Ages does not make sense if we look at the Eastern Roman Empire. If we look at, let's say, the eastern, southeastern part of Europe. And then if we would move even a little bit later and a bit further away from Europe, it also does not make sense. Because in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th century, we see the rise of the Islamic empires, the rise of Islam, and also the Islamic Golden Age. There was, let's say, the center of the world in terms of science at that time was Baghdad, and there was so much new science, let's say, or new knowledge being discovered, let's say. So algebra, medicine, it was a super high level. Also, they preserved all texts from ancient Greece, from ancient philosophers like Aristotle, Socrates, all of those very important guys. They were reading them, they were translating them, they were preserving their knowledge, while in Europe we still had the Dark Ages and a lot of knowledge were lost. So when in one place it's a dark age, in another place it might be a golden age, a time of great development, of prosperity. So you can already see that time periods in one place do not apply to what's happening in other places. Very important thing to remember. Also, if you look at other places, they also might have another perspective on time, and time periods also don't apply to that. So, for example, in China, in Chinese history, we use dynasties. So, what are dynasties? Dynasties are ruling families, families that are in charge. And when one family is, let's say, overthrown, goes away, another one starts, and that's how we can periodize history. So the most important one is the Han Dynasty. People who live in China are also called Han Chinese, so they speak, let's say, the language of the Han. So there was a very important dynasty. You also had important ones, Tang, Song, and the last one was Qing Dynasty. So in China they use dynasties, and the whole Western periodization also does not make sense at all. And they also had a bit of a different way of looking at time. So in the West, it's more of, let's say, linear. It's like time moves on and it's more like a line. While in China, it's a bit more like a circle or a cycle. And we speak about the dynastic cycle. So it means one dynasty is in charge. They spread their power. They get stronger. And they also, what's important is the concept of the mandate of heaven. So they say, look, we gain power, we are powerful, the gods apparently like us and they approve of us. So we have this mandate, this task from heaven, from the gods to rule. But then maybe there's a disaster, a flood, a famine, some plague, invasions occur, and everything goes wrong. So apparently the gods do not like this ruling family anymore. Another family or strong group of people take over. They found a new dynasty, and the cycle repeats itself. So in China, it's way more of a cycle we see in history of dynasties gaining power, losing power, and another one coming back. So when comparing Western versus Chinese history, in the West, it's more of like a line. So based on the overall development, so also early modern and then modern. While in China, it's way more like a circle, like a cycle based on those ruling dynasties. And also then, if we look at China right now, there's not a ruling family. The Communist Party is in charge. But it might be like the same principle. So like the emperors, they also have loads of power. And maybe in the future, when things will go wrong, then they get overthrown and there will be a new party or a new leader emerging. And it's again this kind of cycle repeating itself. So in conclusion, we could say that, remember, the Western time periods, they do not apply to other places. So we cannot really speak about Middle Ages or a Dark Age when we look at for example, the Islamic Golden Age, at least before 1800. Then with globalization, you could maybe say, okay, for everyone it's now modern times or post-World War II because there are world wars. Then it applies for everyone. And other civilizations might also have other perspectives on time and how they make periods. In the next video, I want to finish this topic up, and talk about some main takeaways. So what should you really remember about time periods in history, and what are like a couple of lessons that are very helpful for you when you study history. So thank you for watching and see you next time.